All right. Welcome in, everybody. Another Thursday. Another LaunchBox stream. Where did I go? I have no idea. Why is my camera not working? I don't know. But for sure, I am here talking with you guys. Let's figure out what the heck is going on. That's first. Oh, I think I know. Just so I can talk to you guys. I'm switching out to another microphone. But basically what happened, this is fun. I had an NVIDIA, I decided I was going to update my NVIDIA GPU drivers. Just to see if it would help with a situation we were looking in LaunchBox or in Big Box. It did not help, by the way. But what it did do was break the NVIDIA broadcast application on my computer, which is controlling my microphone and controlling my camera. So that's fun. So let's see if I can unbreak NVIDIA broadcast. Wonder what that would take. Let's find out. But hopefully you guys can hear me, and soon enough, hopefully you guys can see me. Oh, it's telling me a new version of NVIDIA Broadcast is out. No, thank you. Okay, camera is working. There you go. You can see me. And now I should be able to move back to NVIDIA Broadcast for the microphone. And now you should be able to hear me okay. Well, you could hear me before. But yeah, welcome in, everybody. It's been a great week, and I'm very excited to open up this package that I just got. I'm trying to get it open, but essentially, it should be a really nice dock for all things handheld computers that I could use for a few tablets, my laptop, a whole bunch of stuff. Hey, Snarfu and Joe, hopefully you guys are doing well. Oh, wow, that's really tight. Look at that. A nice blurry, looks like aluminum laptop. Looks like it can go 360 around. It's pretty cool. It's got a whole bunch of ports in it. Looks like three USB 3.0s and a USB-C HDMI that they for some reason called HDTV. I don't know why they accidentally gave it that name. It even has a LAN port. That's pretty cool. An SD card port? Who uses SD cards in their computers? But yeah, I was getting this. This should allow my work computer to function a lot better. It should stop it from overheating. I tend to do a lot on my computers, So that's cool to see. Feels very nice, I must say. Yeah, I'm trying to make it so that my setups are as good as can be, so that nothing technical is standing in the way of getting LaunchBox as good as it could be. So I've been talking a lot about LaunchBox over the last few hours, and I think it will be no different here. So yeah, welcome in. Snarfu, yeah, they fixed the black screen issue and broke broadcast. Well, it seemed to be that you update the every time you do these driver updates, it just messes with these programs that don't know what to do when something like that happens. I should have noticed that beforehand, but obviously I just did not have time to review this stuff before I hit the stream button, unfortunately, this week. I usually do have a few seconds to do that, but this week in particular, I guess not. Hopefully everybody's gearing up for a long weekend if you guys have it. If you don't, apologies. But here in Canada, we get Friday off, so tomorrow everybody in Canada will just be off to celebrate the Easter long weekend. So excited about that. But what have we been doing inside of LaunchBox? What have you guys been doing inside of LaunchBox? I would love to hear that. And obviously, just like every week, if you have any questions about LaunchBox, about your build, about LaunchBox in general, about life, I will answer it to the best of my ability. But what are we going to talk about if nobody has questions? We are going to go behind the scenes over the last week of LaunchBox and what we've been talking about and everything that I managed to write down in about a good 30-second period about everything I remembered that what we did over the last week. We actually did quite a lot as I was writing the stuff down, and I can explain it and try to give context as to why we're doing all of this stuff and the solutions and the conclusions that we've come to moving forward and things that we want to do even moving forward beyond that. So we'll talk about the Windows application first. We'll talk about the Android application as well, which Andre will love that we did that. We'll talk about a little bit about the web. I don't think there was much. Yeah, let's talk about the web as well. And then we will go into our... I've written a bunch of stuff that we can talk about feature-wise. And stuff that we've been planning out behind the scenes, stuff that we haven't planned out at all. Next week, 100%, I'll make sure to go to FeatureBase and write out all of those ideas. It's been a few weeks since I did that, but for people that want to get your ideas in and vote, more importantly, vote for ideas that you see on FeatureBase, you'll want to go to feedback.launchbox.gg. I'll type that into the chat for people to go to now and for people to see if they're watching this on YouTube later. So Snarfu, your long weekend, the LaunchBox project is to do your annual-ish upgrade of your MAME installation. Do you have you customized your metadata in any way for any of your MAME games? Yeah, that's a big one. MAME is always a big one. Like, how does your MAME look and feel in your library? What do you do? Is it a full set and then you pare it down? Is it a... are you looking for very specific games? So you don't even start with the full set? MAME's a big one. But we do have some tutorials 2 installs. Does that mean 2 separate launch boxes or 2 separate MAME packs? I guess 2 separate launch boxes. That's what you mean. Okay, so you keep everything default, and I'm assuming that you use a full set. Or at least start as that as a base. I can show you. Maybe this could help you a little bit. I don't know. Maybe not. But if I went and downloaded a full set, so let's say I went and I got whatever's out now, 276. Has 277 come out yet? No, we're just in the middle of April. So you download the complete set, and then you open LaunchBox, and here's what you see. And you have like an arcade section, and there's all of your games. What you can do is go to Tools, Import, the MAME full set, right? Call it the same thing as before. Here I'm just going to point, let's pretend that I'm pointing to a brand new set of 276. So I do that, I choose the latest 276, I hit next, and then we're presented with 3 options. One of them is actually update the MAME emulator that you currently have. So let's do that. So I'm going to hit update the MAME emulator. It's going to download the version of the emulator that I just set, which was 276. Right, so far I've pointed to my new ROMs for that version. I told LaunchBox which version it was, and then I told it to update the MAME emulator that I've had configured inside of LaunchBox. What that should do is just replace the application portion of that folder, but not delete any of your configuration that you made inside of MAME. If that makes sense, if that matters to you. So now choose some options. Do I want to download some more media and stuff like that? And you can choose whatever you'd like there. You can choose whether you want bezels, and then you can choose how you want to import it based on these filter options. I'm just going to keep everything default, except I'm going to uncheck I don't want to create these playlists, but you very well might want to. And then I hit next. What will this do? This will build a MAME list file directly from the MAME version that it downloaded earlier in this wizard. It will build a MAME XML file that we use based on this very specific ROM version 276, which will then tell us which games we should import based on MAME's own data for this version, right? If MAME is going to say in 276 game A is not working, we're not going to import it, because in that filter window I indicated don't import games that are not working. Then it builds a list of the games it's going to import, as well as any clone versions that I don't think are represented here. So if you could actually sit here and parse this list if you wanted to, right? I can sit here, Alien Storm, and I can hit the delete button, and it should get rid of it. So let's say I didn't want our Area 51 Maximum Force Duo. Oh no, I can. Oh, that doesn't look fun, does it? Alright, the delete button doesn't work for this. I'm thinking the ROM import wizard, which is different. Okay, finish. Now, it just downloaded the latest version of the metadata file from our server based off of all of the more current changes that happened over in the database. It's now using that, along with that MAME list file, to import all of the games based on the filter options that I set. Then it's going to replace all of the games that I have in arcade, or at least all of with these new games, new version of the games, if that makes sense, automatically. This process, since I'm bringing in about 3,000 games, will take a little while. But by the end of this, I mean, we should be good to go. And while this is going, maybe you can answer this question. Do you keep your CHD files in the same ROM folder, or do you keep them separate? Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Then you'll have no problems. A little tip for people that do want to keep it separate. So it upgraded probably this one. I have so many different versions of MAME, and now I've got two 276 versions of MAME. Let's say I kept it in a different folder, and you can see this path right here is the default command line parameters. Some people, we set these to give sort of a baseline experience in MAME. You can remove any of these that you want, any of these like dashes. We could do a better job explaining what each one does, but you know, we crop artwork. I know a lot of people don't want to crop artwork to make it so that if you're using bezels, it basically makes the video or the game screen as large as it can be on your screen, and then it puts the bezel around it. But because of that, it crops some of that bezel. So if you'd rather see bezel and a smaller screen, you would remove that. Let's say maybe this VSync thing, which is great if your computer is powerful enough. Maybe your computer's not powerful enough. You might want to remove that, for example. But if you had your CHD files in a different folder, you could put a semicolon here and then go, you know, path to CHD files here. If there's a space, you probably have to put it in quotes, I'm guessing. I could be wrong. All right, and then we would do this ROM location variable, which is basically your arcade game path, and then the secondary path it will read as well. MAME allows you to have like multiple game paths, ROM paths, and it would read both locations to find both your ROMs and where your CHDs are, and you'd be good to go. Well, let's say you do end up getting two MAME versions. Well, now the new one is the one that you're pointing to, and you can simply just delete the old one. Anyway, 100% that did work to upgrade your current one at some point. We even broke it at some point and then fixed it. I think it was more recently. Now we're on the end of this list. It's just going to save it, and voila, it's done. You can see it used the same artwork that I had before. If it added new games and I chose to download artwork, as long as I had the media limit on, it wouldn't download more artwork. And as far as I'm aware, our new favorite game, Viper Phase 1, everyone's favorite new game, is should be playable. It's definitely going to display on a different screen. I got like 4 monitors, so it's over here on this monitor, not over here on the monitor that you guys can see. You can kind of hear it. Viper Phase 1, it's great in that you have to wait 1,000 seconds the first time you launch it for it to build the NVRAM file. And then after that, it will play. You can somewhat fast forward it. Does anybody know of a way to fast forward it more than that one fast forward button that they have that now is escaping me? Because it does make it faster, but not that much faster. I gotta press it harder, the insert key. Yeah. It goes like 150% to maybe it jumps up to 180%. I'm seeing 160 to 170%. Not even 2 times faster. I want it to be like 10 times faster. That's what I want. So I can just get through that window. But yeah, I guess not. Depends on the game. Dang it. No universal fast forward. Anyway, yeah, so we're actually testing to make this game work with high scores, which currently has a problem. Basically, this is what's problem with MAME high scores. The way that it works, essentially, and we have to like review this and make sure that it's like working this way. When you launch a game that has MAME high scores, we run the really nice high to text program made by Greatstone, which I think was a fork of a different project that happened a long time ago. And what this program does is that first it checks to see if there's a .hi file of an existence. If there is, it will read it, put it into text, and output that text that we can read. And that is basically a dump of the game's current high score boards. If the high score doesn't exist, it then tries to read the NVRAM file, and through its wizardry can also grab high scores. And so if there's no high file, it reads that, it dumps out in the same way the high scores and that we can read. If that file, or if it's still unable to read a high score for those two methods, you just continue to play. And so you play, and when the game closes, we once again ask for to run the high to text command, and we read the high file, go through the same process. Read the high file, read NVRAM if required, grab the output of the high scores. And we take like the new high score and the old one, and we compare it. And if there's any difference, if there's like a new one, we upload that new score to the MAME high score leaderboards in LaunchBox, or the LaunchBox high score leaderboards. You can make me try this. Press F9 once more. Not doing anything. Seems to not do anything on my computer. I mean, the F9 button runs that skip. Still only going as fast as 160 to 170. That's weird. I mean, still super slow. I wish that worked on my computer. What are you hiding? Or which game? Like Joe said, it game specific. Anyway, the problem with Viper Phase 1 is the first time that you launch it, it's running this 1,000-second countdown. And so when we go and we basically say, hey, run this command, there's no high file, so it fails that. Then it checks NVRAM, but it's building the NVRAM, so there's nothing to compare it, so nothing to grab yet. So it grabs nothing, then it continues. By the end of it, the NVRAM is completed. You close the game, it reads the NVRAM, it finds all of the scores, the default score, and with nothing to compare it to, it says all of these scores are new. Upload them all to the LaunchBox high score leaderboards. And everybody, without playing the game, gets the highest score on the leaderboard. So, yeah, congratulations to everybody. Yeah, we're going to try and fix that. How was that fix going, Josh? It's possible that, like, we're trying to fix it in a global way that will hopefully work with any other games we don't even know about that have the same problem. Yeah, I don't think that there's a special fix hotkey for this one, unfortunately. Anyway, that was one thing on my mind that I thought I should explain. So yeah, MAME high score. Viper Phase 1 fun. We can talk a little bit more seriously about the VLC conundrum. So for people that are not aware, we have... This is sort of how it works. Oh yeah, there you go. I think Game Noob gave you the answer, Josh. That is the special key, Alt F4. The way that VLC works like this. So LaunchBox bundles VLC with its program, right? It's literally located in LaunchBox third-party VLC, a specific version that we've somewhat meticulously tested in the past with different kinds of video files. So it's probably never the latest version. Sometimes later versions can fix things, sometimes it can break things. Not important in this talk, though. Just important to know, we don't use a version of VLC that you've installed on your computer, if you install one. We use this version. But VLC isn't really like native to our .NET WPF environment. It has no idea how to take what's being shown in VLC and display it on the screen. And so what you need is somebody very smart to wrap VLC into something that's usable in .NET and WPF. And so someone did this. Some guy. A very long time ago. On an old version of VLC. And so at this point, and we went and we said, hey, this guy solved this problem and built this wrapper. Let's get his wrapper, downloaded it, and use it in this project. And so at this point, we are beholden to whatever's in that wrapper, and as well as what's beholden inside of VLC itself. You know, the rules that VLC can't run anything more than VLC can run. We have all of the issues that this version of VLC has. You know, any known problems that VLC has will have it. And then on top of that, any known problems that this wrapper has, we have it now that we're using it. And so it's like a double layer of stuff that we don't really have access to fix or even see. And so what's happened is VLC is now freezing up Big Box. And so we spent like weeks looking as to why and narrowed it down to that it's the wrapper that is causing this problem. It's not VLC, it's not Big Box, it's this wrapper. Okay, so let's look to see if maybe this author has made any updates to this wrapper for any modern system, any fixes that he might have had since we included this into our project. Apparently no, and he's retired this wrapper basically. Hasn't updated it in long time, very many years, so that's a problem. So now we're in a situation where we've committed for years to this wrapper that's no longer being supported. There doesn't appear to be a suitable replacement. Most replacements that people have tried to recommend to us or things like that will have issues. I mean, either all themes are going to break because you're going to have to change code, or the new wrapper is going to include what we call airspace, which the best thing I can describe that as is the thing tries to like overlay the VLC video on top of WPF, on top of your theme. Let's say, break it down as a theme. You have your theme, you have Big Box, and then it tries to put the video on top of Big Box. And so you can't put anything. So Big Box cannot put anything on top of the video. And so lots of themes would break because of that. Like immediately. So we can't use those solutions. So we basically went, oh wait, Windows Media Player, which has had systemic long-term issues for many years on old .NET versions, suddenly is like the most robust version of Windows Media Player it's ever been when we updated to .NET 9. It no longer has the systemic memory leak that it once had, and it no longer is causing like crashes within like an hour like we've tested many times over the years. And it seems to be like much more performant, all this good stuff. Just randomly, it's like this amazing video player somehow. And the quickest solution that we come up with is, what if we just make Windows Media Player? When we make that the video player for now, because it's already there. We already have support for it. It's already working. So what are the problems with Windows Media Player? Well, the main one is that it doesn't support as many codecs as the other one. Okay, well, that's where we saw that you can solve that by adding codecs to Windows Media Player. And the best one that's available, that's been around forever, and that continuously gets updates, and it's from, I think, the Netherlands or something, is the K-Lite codec pack. And so we reached out to them. They're okay with us including it as a package that we can try to install, and we are now putting that inside of the installer. And since then, we realized some places in the world has forced Microsoft to not bake Windows Media Player into their application. And when we realized that, we found out what the option is to make Windows Media Player work during our installer, and we built that out. And so at this point, we have the ability, the installer will check to see if you have K-Lite, check to see if you have Windows Media Player enabled, and check to see if you have Windows Media Player even installed. It also does a fourth check to see if you even have .NET 3.1 installed, which is actually some third-party dependency that we use that still requires that for some reason the installer doesn't check for. So we have all those checks now in the installer. And if everything is good, you have all of those things, you'll find that the installer will just run the checks, end, and start LaunchBox. And so we're going to go from an installer that always checked for DirectX to an installer that has the potential to, or that doesn't have any mandatory UAC prompts or admin elevation prompts, but does have a bunch of checks. Although our current installer even now has a bunch of checks. I think it has a C++ check and one other check. Maybe it's only the C++ check and the DirectX mandatory one. And so by the end of this, everybody's going to update, and we're going to bring Windows Media Player as like the default one that seems to work for everything. But there has been people that still want to use VLC, because there are some people that say, hey, I wasn't having problems with VLC. I know the majority of people do in our tests. The majority, every single build, if you build it in a specific way, which is the normal way to build your library, does have VLC problems. But if you don't have any videos, well, I guess in that instance, you wouldn't really care what playback thing you're using. But for some pieces of hardware that we cannot gather why, people don't have VLC freezing issues, or maybe you're not using it for long enough to see them. And so what we did was, people were complaining that there was a lot of freezing issues during the beta, and they were lumping those issues together. So they had some issue with Big Box, and they were kind of lumping them in with the Big Box freeze issue, thinking that they were the same thing. And we would say, well, change to Windows Media Player and then keep testing. And they'll come back and say, well, we changed it to Windows Media Player and it's still causing problems, which kind of confuses us. And it turns out that the people that were saying that were actually changing the option inside of LaunchBox and not the option inside of Big Box. So we're like, well, let's remove any problems during this beta. Let's remove VLC and see how many people are still complaining about this one freezing issue. So we did that. We removed it as a test to see, and it basically eliminated that particular freezing issue, not to confuse it with any other problem that users might have that also do something similar to freezing, just not this exact one. Which is great, because we can confirm that for this problem, 100% of the people will be solved that have this problem by doing this, which is what we want to do, right? And so we're leaning into that for now. But now that we're ending the beta, what we're going to do is we're going to bring back VLC as sort of like a deprecated option for people that still want to use it. But knowing full well that if you are using it and you do find that you're having some sort of problem, like this freezing issue or something, the first thing you should do is switch back to Windows Media Player and see if you're still having that same issue. And so we'll put some warnings, like if you're going to use this, know that we are getting rid of this once we find a suitable replacement. So that search for that suitable replacement is ongoing. We have some leads, and we're hoping by the next release we'll have it in there. And that's the VLC conundrum that have gone through over this last month or so. Another thing that at the same time that people know nothing about is, I'm going to write down the word atom tables. I should say long-term stability of Big Box. Now, we had solved long-term stability in Big Box before we upgraded to .NET 9. And it turned out to be something called atom tables. I'm not going to go into what those are, but you can look into them if you really want to. But essentially, what happens is that LaunchBox or Big Box was running out of these indexes. Not confuse that with memory. It's not running out of memory. It's not running out of CPU resources or any of that. It's a different kind of resource that all Windows applications require, but for some reason nobody knows about. And we were using too many of these over a long period of time. And so after a day or 2 or 3 or 4 or however many days it takes, depending on your library size and all that stuff, you would run out of it, and Big Box wouldn't crash, but it would feel like laggier, like it was chugging along or something. And so you would only really run into this if you were a person that decided, I'm going to keep Big Box open for weeks at a time, and I'm going to make attract mode just run nonstop for 24/7 for weeks and weeks. And you would hit that limit, and then it would just like feel like you want to restart it. Like wouldn't crash. It just feel sluggish and slow and laggy in some portions. So we spent a considerable amount of time in this release realizing this problem exists again, and we essentially solved it in a better way that hopefully won't break if we need to update to a new version of .NET 9. How many people even use attract mode here? Is that even a common thing that people like to have in their builds? I mean, I don't know if you're still around, Snarfu, but you have an arcade cabinet. Anybody with an arcade cabinet keep Big Box running 24/7? That'd be an interesting question. But this update should allow that to happen in a much better way. Like, you could run Big Box, and I have run Big Box for weeks at this point. We do. Okay, so you just keep it on and you don't use attract mode. I guess the question is, what is it about attract mode that you then go and turn it off? What don't you like about it? Is it like it's too busy? Maybe there's other reasons. I know why I have UX concerns about it, but I'm curious to know what made you make that decision. The known issue that we know about, that we might not be able to get to until next release, is that we went and we put in a solution for, we have an out of memory issue that's not actually an out of memory issue, that's caused when certain computers go to sleep. And when it comes back, LaunchBox says out of memory. And so we had put in a fix in the hopeful fix, which worked on my computer. So it must have worked on some computers, but not all of them. We still get reports that's not working. The latest report was for the ROG Ally was causing this problem. I do have an ROG Ally, so I can test that out later. Know that it's on our radar, and we won't forget about this, even if it might not come in this update. So your cab, so you don't see a purpose for it. You look at it and you go, this is giving me nothing. No benefit at all. And your cab, which is just a normal computer, I'm guessing, with Windows 10 or 11. I don't think it matters if it's 10 or 11. Is so you just turn the computer off completely. Okay. So yeah, it's on our radar. It'd be nice to know, because I was getting it on my laptop, and then when we put in the fix, I was no longer getting it on my laptop. Okay. Interesting. I don't think it's related to like integrated GPUs. I kind of wonder. Could be related to specific drivers. Has the cool glowing skull, so you have to keep it. I mean, as long as it's running fine for you, like, that's all that matters. I think I went through everything on my list except this one. So, if you guys know Dragon 57, who is the creator of the Windows application that installs the bezels from the Bezel project. So he's from the Bezel project. A few more minutes to get into Mr. Do. I also tend to not leave it on for like weeks at a time. Mostly related to energy bills and stuff like that. But sometimes I want to have it on for like a day. But during the time that I want to have it on, I tend to just leave it on. I won't put it to sleep. I won't do anything like that. Haven't seen that problem, but at least I have some leads I can test it and see. So anyway, Dragon 57, he's the Bezel project guy. He has a conundrum he's trying to solve. And I'm wondering if anybody has run into this problem, because it feels like it's one of those issues that when you run into it, you can't like unsee it, that you have to mention it to someone like Dragon 57. So he hears about this a lot. But let's say you were using, so this is the Bezel project conundrum. He's, as people know, if you use the Bezel project, does anybody here use the Bezel project? Because this would make this make sense to you. So the Bezel project is a project where they have a bezel for every single game, right? That's the goal. There you go. The real Sully. So maybe you can answer me this if you've ran into this. The way, and Andrew Speck, welcome in. Maybe you can, do you use the bezel project at all? Let's say you are using the bezel project for every single one of your platforms, whether in LaunchBox or outside of LaunchBox, it doesn't matter. This is a RetroArch specific issue. And you're using, I'm going to give an example, but there probably are other examples out there, probably for like Nintendo stuff. But let's say you're using the Sega Genesis Plus GX, whatever the core is called, for your consoles. For, let's say, the Sega Genesis, and you're using it for the Sega Master System. And in your build, you're using those two cores for both of those platforms, and you've gone and you downloaded, let's say, the Sega Genesis one. So you go and you download Sega Genesis and set that whole thing up. The bezel project's working. Everything's great. And what you do is then you go to the Sega Master System and you download all the bezels for Sega Master System, and you set it up and everything's great. But then you notice that, I don't know, let's give an example here that probably isn't true, but I'll give it anyway. You start playing the Sega Genesis version of Aladdin, and it starts showing you the Sega Master System Aladdin bezel. And you go, what the heck? Like, why is this happening? Hey, no Garth. I'm glad you made it back this week. And the reason why you would see the Sega Master System bezel when you play the Sega Genesis version of Aladdin is the way that RetroArch stores these files. And the best way to do it is to kind of show you guys what happens and how these bezels actually work. But essentially what's happening is long live, yeah, Retro Wizzy. Actually, we're going to talk about that a little bit today. A little bit. And Snarfu, you keep a rotatable monitor to play games? Okay, so you just, yeah, that's actually pretty cool. I looked into setting something like that up for myself, but I wanted it to be like a TV, like a big TV mounted on the wall that I could rotate into 16 by 9 to 9 by 16. And I also do find bezels a bit distracting, depending on the bezel, depending on the platform, depending on the system. I do think that bezels could be a good thing. Like, I mean, maybe that's what we could talk about at some point. I'm going to write that down. How would we make bezels more useful? Wall-mounted CRT, yeah. Wouldn't that be crazy? That you can rotate? Anyway, this is how bezels work. The way that they had to set this up, because it's game specific. So let's just go with Sega Genesis. You have to create a game specific configuration file that's named after the file name. And we put it in config, the core, Genesis plus GX, and then named after the file. So let's say Aladdin. Here's Aladdin. We open it up, and there's like some things about overlays, right? Enable the overlay, check this location for the overlay config file, and make the overlay's opacity 100%. That's basically what this is saying. And so it looks in overlays, game bezels, Master System Aladdin for this. Now, because it's in the core folder, if I were to then run the process to create these files, the bezels again, and the name of the two games, Aladdin, if the file names were exactly the same, it would overwrite this file from one to the other, which means that if I started with the Sega Genesis and created this file, and then I ran Sega Master System, because they both use the same core, it's now overwritten the Sega Genesis config override with the Sega Master System override. It's sort of like a systemic issue with RetroArch right now because of how they store this information. If they instead put in like a fix that would allow you to store these game-specific configs within like a content directory folder or something else that's not core specific, this would not be a problem. But they don't, so this is the problem that Dragon 57 is trying to solve. How do we make it so that these games that are from different platforms but have the same name across different platforms are causing causing these game-specific configuration files to overwrite each other? And there's a few different solutions that you can do. They're kind of hacky. They're all hacky solutions, but all come with positives and negatives. And depending on who you talk to, depending on how big those negatives are. So one of the solutions is this. Let's make it so when you launch Sega Master System, we create a very specific RetroArch Sega Master System config file that is used instead of your normal RetroArch config file. And in there, we have all of your options, your global options, including all of the I think he said he changed like 8 lines to point to a location that doesn't currently exist. Basically say, well, look here for like a very specific Sega Master System folder. I think he called it config master system. So let's look here in a very specific folder that I just made up myself, and we'll tell RetroArch to look there for just the Sega Master System. Now in LaunchBox, the way that you would have to do this is you'd have to go into the RetroArch emulator window, and then you would go to the associated platforms. You would find Sega Master System, and you would put in, not this, you would put in -C, and then you would point to that file. So you're basically forcing the global config file to be this file, which works. Then it creates those files, and then the Bezel project will dump all of those game-specific config files into this new folder, and there'd be a different one for Sega Genesis, a different folder, and all that stuff. The con with this solution is that after you set this up, so let's say you're a Bezel project connoisseur and you love the Bezel project, and you set this up for 50 platforms, and you go down the list and you set it all up. The problem that ends up happening is that you have now fractured your global config list by 50. So if I've set that all up and then I go into here, open RetroArch, and I change any global setting whatsoever, I go to settings, and any of these, I change an audio setting, an input setting, driver setting, frame throttle setting, all the way down, core settings, saving settings, achievement settings. Any change that I make here will not be reflected in all of those 50 platforms when you launch a game. What you would actually have to do is make the change, find the lines where the change has happened, copy those lines, and paste them into all 50 of those platform-specific config files to match those configs in those for those platforms. That's what you would have to do in this new world. So that's what we're wrestling over. Like, I don't know how much people would want to do that if they find themselves in, like, you solved the problem and you've introduced another problem. That you now need to solve. Right, the example I gave is, hey, somebody imports 50 platforms. Let's say LaunchBox automatically set up these 50 universal or these 50 platform-specific config files, downloads the bezels are all working. And then later they go into RetroArch and they sign into... They go and they sign into retro achievements. All of those 50 platforms that we've set up because of the bezel project, you are not signed into retro achievements. You would have to find the retro achievement options, copy those lines, paste them into all 50 of those places. Now there is something that I didn't realize called you can append a config file. So you can say use this global config, but also look inside of this other config file that might have some overrides. And so a solution was, well, you can put the RetroArch, or so the retro achievement configs into that appended config file and make sure that that's loaded all the time. It's like, okay, that makes sense if we were to also do that. So we create this like fractured environment and then we piecemeal solutions for every single global option imaginable for RetroArch. And also append that for all of the options. And then therefore what you would find inside of the associated platforms is for every single line you would see this like C-C RetroArch Sega Master System config, and then it would also append some sort of like new file that we create, global RetroArch config. And so every single one would have to have that. Inside of this one that we make, we would have to identify every single global config that RetroArch could have and paste them in there. And so for future updates, if they introduce a new setting, we would not have it in this file. We would have to then go identify what the new setting is, what it's called, add it to this, and somehow update it, make its way down to everybody that's in this situation. And we kind of introduce a lot of work and potential problems long term by doing something like this. But it is a solution that could happen for people that want to be in this scenario. Anyway, thought I'd share. That is a conversation that is definitely happening right now behind the scenes. What could we do? Again, this could all be solved. I mean, this could be solved in two ways. One, you rename your file, like the user could rename their file and be proactive in a way that the rename is different than between systems, that would solve the problem. You could also solve the problem if RetroArch just created the ability to have content directory specific, game specific config files. That would solve the problem as well. One of those two things would solve this conversation that Dragon and I have been having. I think that's it for Windows. On Android, I think that since last week, Beta 4 has been out, and people have definitely given us feedback. It's working a lot better than Beta 3 due to various reasons that we fixed in Beta 4. And it's basically mostly ready to go. What we've been doing is kind of fleshing out the scope storage stuff that we've been working on. This update is all about like emulators and platforms kind of thing. Making as many emulators as we can just work out of the box, and as many configurations as you possibly can muster. The problem on Android, which I mentioned multiple times because it's just a problem that's not on Windows at all, is that there is no universal way to basically say this is the file, this is the file path, their emulator, just run this game, right? There's no like comparable CMD, universal CMD that we have on Windows. And so because of that, we're in a situation where we heavily tested DuckStation on multiple devices that I have, like 5 devices. And it works great. It actually works without scope storage. So they somehow managed to get scope storage or front-end compatibility in newer versions of DuckStation. I don't know when that happened, but it was probably recent enough within the last year. But yeah, they can do that. It's not working for this one guy who has almost the exact same device as me, just slightly newer. So that's odd. That wasn't you, was it, Andrew? That wasn't you. No, I respond to these things. Sometimes I don't even read. Okay, maybe that was you. Okay, isn't that weird? So I'm like trying to get the exact same scenario as you, and it's working 100%. It's like, so you're left thinking, okay, what is the difference? Okay, if the hardware is almost the same, if the software is almost the same, if the files are basically the same, and you've confirmed that, hey, this like DuckStation setup, it's running this game fine. It knows where these games are. Why is it having such a hard time? And so what we're going to attempt to do is make scope storage an option for every emulator. And so if you are having this problem, try to click this new scope storage option in the emulator settings, set your game folder. What that essentially does, what scope storage is actually doing, is well, no, that I did test that scenario. So you said you were on the latest version like a beta version, basically, like an unreleased version of DuckStation. And I installed that version, and it's working fine. But both versions, I think the store version and the normal APK, very, very similar to each other at this point. That might change in the future, but very similar. So that's a conundrum, right? So if we make scope storage, which basically sends a different path to the application, which in theory is supposed to make it easier for like these new paths, the emulator should have an easier time reading. What we found was that's not always the case, actually. Like, ignoring the whole problem with scope storage and the fact that it doesn't actually have controller support, so you need a touchscreen to navigate it. There seems to be a difference, like this magical path that gets created, where the user has to set permissions on. Basically, as a user, you're saying, yep, allow this application and this other application to be able to read this folder. And so you send that folder path, and it's not actually working. For some emulators, where the old path, it is working. Like, that's odd. Like, I guess that magical path isn't as magical as some would like to believe. So now we need a way to both set scope storage for every emulator and clear scope storage for every emulator for troubleshooting purposes, for when on specific devices, whatever we deemed was working and a user goes, no, it's not working, give them the power to easily check between this old path and this new path, between scope storage and not scope storage, basically, and see if that's a problem. And so that's what we've been struggling with, the scoped storage conundrum. Outside of that, the app's been running pretty good. I would say that one thing that I would like to do, it won't be the primary thing, but in the future, I want to look at building out a more modern theme for the Android app. You want to do a few things. But we don't talk about the Android app. If there's anybody here like you, Andrew, who does use the application, what are the things that you would want to see added to this application that would just make it just right for you? And while you're answering that, the only thing on the web that we can mention that happened over the last week was moderation queue broke again. And we made some more changes to hopefully have it never happen again. It's the most layman way that I can put it. All right, we got some time left. This is not going to be a full 3 hours, unfortunately. I don't have that time. But I did want to talk a little bit about one effort that I'm kind of really excited about that goes, for you know, Garth. It goes back to this whole Wizzy thing. The idea is this, and we talked about this a little bit last week. What if you could ask LaunchBox about a particular thing that you're trying to do, and it would answer it for you? An opposite inverted rotation lock. Who knows? Maybe that's easy. All right. Basically, what you're asking for is like all four sides rotation lock. I don't know if that's don't know if that's 100% possible. I can understand why people would want it. I can understand why you would want it. I can understand that you want the device to be a specific way so that certain buttons wouldn't be pressed when you're using it, or sometimes you'll have like a controller or something where the button's now like upside down into the controller, you can't access it. You just wish you could just like flip it. And there's the man, Andre, who's here's the deal, Snarfoo. So we do have a rotation lock, but it's just specific to, I guess, portrait or landscape, basically. I think those are the options if you're using it. But you can't choose which side you want the landscape to be. You can't like hold your phone upside down, for example. Like have it work. All right, let me use the link. Which? Wait, hold on. So is that a phone? That kind of so that's a phone inside of like a case, like a controller thing. That's what it kind of looks like, right? Wait, did you write what that looks like? Some USB-C gamepads with the USB-C port on the left side. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so you have no option. Maybe the solution is you need a better USB-C, a better USB-C gamepad. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, I mean, I've got one right here. I've got the old Kishi, so I understand. I got like this one. I could put my phone into it. Now I have it on the right side. So I don't have that problem. I did not think that anyone would create one where the USB-C would be on the left side. That seems kind of funny. But I guess they do. Yeah, so mine kind of wraps properly. Yeah, I don't really have much on this phone, but yeah, it seems to be okay with the Kishi, but I can understand that's a problem. But it sounds like it's possible. There you go. We got the answer from Andre already. So cool. We can do that. Now that we already have that feature in there, I'm sure it wouldn't be a big deal to add a few different options. Wait, but is that it? So we just solved LaunchBox for Android for you? We're done. Andre, you're done. You don't have to work anymore. LaunchBox for Android is finished. I'm glad we could get that in there. Probably simple enough that we get in there before the next release. So between those two applications, if all goes well, we should be we should be done and available. Like the official release should be next week, maybe. Chunky. Hey, I didn't call it complete. That was enough for Andrew. I did ask, and you were probably not here yet. What was the one? I shouldn't say one. What you already told us which features you want, but if you had to just choose one, what would make LaunchBox for Android complete for you? While you're trying to choose from your many feature requests, I am going to bring up a few more things because I think I have about a half an hour where we can discuss a few things. I was just talking about what if LaunchBox could answer questions for you, like a little thing that I'm struggling with a particular feature or something, and I just go down there and I ask it, hey, how can I do this? And hit enter and have LaunchBox tell you the answer to that question. And that becomes your first line of defense when you're dealing with something in LaunchBox, when you're trying to learn LaunchBox, when you're trying to figure out certain features about LaunchBox. How can we make that a reality? Oh, that's a great request. Because we can talk a lot about how to get to an answer there and a solution. Maybe somebody has a better solution than we do. But anyway, we'll talk about it after this. Let me write that down. Make MAME work with our NAS feature. Okay. So how do we make this self? I don't know. We can call it like AI Wizzy guy. You can ask him a question and he gives you the answer on the spot, and that becomes your first line of defense. Well, as you guys know, we just got this the feedback brought to you by FeatureBase here, and what this actually gives you, but we don't actually have. But it is kind of live. So if anybody does want to go to /help, it's not done yet, so that's why it's not public. The first thing says, well, how can we help you? And you can ask it a question. And if we can write articles for this, and if the answer exists in any of those articles, it will give you the answer to that. So we have this capability, and the only thing stopping us from releasing this is just not having enough articles. That, like, the more information that we feed this thing, basically we have to create a LaunchBox Bible, essentially, that answers everybody's questions. And as soon as we have that, then you can simply just type in your question here, and you would get an answer. Right? You would type in a question that's like, I don't know, the new media packs. Like I said, I just heard that LaunchBox had an update that introduced media packs. The heck are these? Hit enter. And now, here, we get back. Well, media packs in LaunchBox, introduced in version 13.21, are customizable asset collections that enhance visuals and user experience in both LaunchBox and BigBox, that allow users to apply different visual themes, such as platform clear logos, platform icons, badges, and the newly added controller inputs, which are specific to BigBox. And here's a quick breakdown. You can manage these media packs in the Tools Manage LaunchBox Themes and Media section. Packs can be applied independently to LaunchBox and BigBox. If a media pack is missing assets for some items, the system falls back to the Nostalgia Media Pack. Controller inputs, which are newly introduced, show dynamically mapped controller actions like select and back in certain themes specific to your controller that you're using. Custom and community packs. So users or content creators basically can create and share media packs for a more personalized and thematic design that you can download, that content creators can upload for others to download. And so it tries to give you like an answer. And the more detailed that our articles will be, the better the response you'll get. So this already exists. Now this system has an API that we could tap into to make it so we could have this exist inside of LaunchBox. That part's not the hard part. The hard part is gathering and filling out that information. That is a good question, Nogarth. Do we have the ability to add questions in there? Maybe not even add questions, but it would be nice for us to have a log of questions that people have asked. That would be just wonderful. And that's a good question for the feature-based team, I think. Let me write that one down. I would love if they did. Right, and then you can even narrow it down very specific. So how do I add my own feature media pack. Now it's saying, well, navigate to the relevant media pack folder, and it gives you some paths depending on which one that you want to do. Duplicate an existing pack, modify the contents of it, test the pack, and here you can share it right from this website. So it does pretty good, and the reason why it's doing pretty good on this topic is because I sat and wrote like 5 articles about our new media pack feature, which is why this thing can understand media packs. It doesn't understand a lot more because we don't have a lot of articles, and it's pulling from these public articles that we have, which is not that many yet. So the more we can beef this up, the more that we can build out this Bible, and that's just about time. That's the part that's going to take the longest. Looking at their APIs and putting this into LaunchBox won't actually be the hard part. So it's just about us finding that time to fill this in. But if you do have any questions, let me know about them. So if anybody has any questions that they're like, wish they knew the answers to in LaunchBox or LaunchBox for Android or really anything, ask them. I mean, just tell me, I'll write them down. Later, if you're watching this on YouTube, I will write them down. I'll look at your comments and write them down. Maybe they'll help us direct which articles to write next, which questions that we need answered. And eventually that we'll get there. I've got a whole list of things that I want to get to already, and it's just about finding time. The more stuff we throw at this, the better and more smarter this can get. And then maybe when we get to some sort of MVP of some kind where we're happy with the information that's on there, then we can kind of say, hey, well, let's roll this out. Let's make this. The first step would be to just make this page more known everywhere. People will be able to access it from different places and be kind of like that first line defense before we put it into LaunchBox, and then keep fleshing it out there. And then the last step would be, hey, now we're happy with where we're at. Let's add it into LaunchBox completely, where that now becomes the place where people can get answers to most of your questions. And once it's in there, there's nothing stopping us from just continuing to add more stuff to the articles. And as we do that in the background, this becomes smarter automatically, like basically instantly. Yeah, you're talking about the LaunchBox for Android NAS feature. So here's how that works. Let me write down your question. Because yeah, I've noticed this as well. Here's the problem. Android doesn't have a native network protocol. That's just not something that Android has. They would consider it to be highly problematic, bad for security if they had this. Like Windows has it. I mean, we can have SMB shares. You have the SMB protocol. Everything in Windows knows about it, and you got no problems. There's nothing like that on Android. Android has no idea where these network attack sorts are. And so we had to build it into our application. And the problem is, in order for us to do that in any semblance of time that would make sense, we go out and we are beholden to a library that has built this these features out already. And so we found one has SMB share support, and we bring it down. And we have to use this library of features, these SMB share features that these guys have built out. We've got some ability to hack away at it a little bit. So for your example, you click on the NAS shares and sometimes it doesn't find the server. Sometimes you have to click on it multiple times. And so like in our power, we can say run the scan to identify the servers. Like that's what we would send and that scan, we don't know what it's doing. It's like a built-in scan in this library that would basically like, yeah, run this and return stuff, and it runs it, and I guess it's returning nothing for whatever the reason is. And so something that we could do as a hack would basically be run the scan and return, now run it again and return, and now run it again and return, and like do that for you. So instead of you having to run it 3 times, we run it 3 times every time behind the scenes for you. And so we could do that to try and solve this problem. What we can't do is make that scan smarter because we don't have control of that scan. It's possible the reason why it's doing that, and I've seen it true, so I don't think this is the case, but it is possible that the protocol that this library is using, it's like running the scans, going out to the network, and the network is actually returning that it doesn't have anything. And when it does that, it's a little bit about network protocols. The first thing it probably tries to do is send like a hello packet, or like a packet that basically tries to like identify what everybody is. It goes, hello, everywhere. Are you? And then they respond. Like all these devices on your network responds. It goes, hello, what would you like? And it goes, boom, sends another packet. Are you an SMB share? Are you a computer that I can talk to that has these shares? And it responds and goes, yes, I am, or no, I'm not. And of course, we might ask the same way, like, if you are, tell us information about you that we can display on the screen. That could help. So like if you knew information about it, now what you would need to know, so manual input of shares. So what you would need to know, the way that Android actually works, which is problematic, it has no idea and has no semblance of the computer name that you've given it. That's not how networks work. It doesn't understand names. It understands IP addresses. So if you knew the IP address, let's say you had an IP address that was like does it manually add network share? You would need to know like something like 192.168.0 whatever 56. Maybe that's your network, and I'm hoping that if you had a NAS that you would be hard coding that value. That would make sense. We can't force anybody to do that, but highly recommended. And then it's possible, and then you would need to know username, password of some kind. that might be enough. And then you could, I guess you could tell us. No, you wouldn't have to tell us. So based on the IP address, we can identify what the name is. We can't do the opposite. We can't take a name and identify what the IP address is. We can take an IP address and identify what the name of the computer is. And so we would gather this information based off of this and save it. The only problem that I have is, like, what is the problem? Is it that this thing scans the network and it just doesn't find anything? Or it scans the network and even though it's there, it somehow isn't getting the return that it's expecting. And so if it's not finding anything, let's say the device itself is not actually available at this exact time every time that you like hit it, and it's not getting the right values, then even though you added it manually, you would be clicking it, and the first time it would still say something like unavailable. You click it again, it would say unavailable. And you would click it a third time, and it would now be like, okay, now it's available. So you basically haven't solved the problem that you actually have. We just like moved it. And so there's some testing that we would have to do to even understand what the heck is going on with this scan. So it's possible the easier solution might just be, it could be outside of our control, right, Nogar? It could be in our control. I don't know. Could be a router thing, 100%. We could run tests. Like, I know that I have an Unraid server that's here. And I know Windows can find it. And I know that if I go on Android, it might take me 1 or 2 tries for the Android scan to find it, whatever it's doing. And so I kind of you see the idea of like, okay, maybe it's not the fact that Linux, like the server is down or not available at that time. Just whatever that this library that we're forced to use is not sending the appropriate stuff that it needs for this particular network that I have. You never know. You never know what the answer is, and that's all outside of our control, unfortunately. One thing that is in our control is to just send it 3 times. Like, we could do that, I guess. That might solve it if that's the problem that people are having. do the whole exchange ourselves, but do it in a different way. Right? We would essentially be like, "Are you there? No. Are you there now? No. Are you there now? Well, yes." Mr. Nibble, it is not remembering them once found. If it's not available at the time, and this is specific, just like what I'm talking about, is during an import. So you go to imports, you say, well, what do you want to import? And then you go, I want to import a network drive. And then it goes, okay, let me see what network drives are available for you to import. And so if we were to remember it, which might be beneficial in some cases, there'd be a lot of things that show up that may or may not be available. And we could show them and we could run something about them, maybe, probably not on that pop-up. We would probably have to move it to some other view. And then we could be like, we could do it there. Yeah, this would become like create a whole new view that could take care of this one scenario. which might be what we would need to do if we decided to do a manual add network share. That's good to know. I don't know if Andre's still there. If you can remember what you used. That's good information. Let me write that down. Doesn't help us now that we're done, like a few releases after this. And then only to find out later that, hey, we are using this. Yeah, I don't remember which one we're using. I could probably search for it. But you never know. Just because they're using it doesn't mean they haven't also put in all of these weird hack things. If that makes sense. It doesn't mean that they haven't thought through this already and put this into their application. Like it's like, oh, we're going to use this, and it's like, oh, it still has the same problem. All right, we're using something else. So yeah, you never know. Although also, at least there's options if we needed it, so that's good to hear. Anyway, back to you, Chunky, if you're still around. Let's talk a little bit about MAME or NAS. What's the problem? This might be the last thing that we talk about. And, God, I didn't even get to features. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. But what do we have to do to accomplish this? Okay, step one. What are the problems? The problem is we have no information. Actually, before we even get to that, to launch a MAME game, you may or may not need more than one file. You may need, I think, on my last count, and I could be wrong about this, you could need up to, I'm going to say 4 files to play a MAME game. Maybe. The problem now is that same game could require down to 1 file, depending on the set that you're using. So it's like, depending on the set and depending on the files, you might need to only send 1 file. You might need to only send 4 files. You might need to send up to 4 files. We don't know. To identify the set, there's almost no way to do this easily. I mean, you can do it, but there's nothing that basically tells us this is the set that you're using. We would have to run a scan on your files if we want it to be like as thorough as possible. We would have to scan all of your files, read the information, the ROMs inside of the zip, and have logic that would deduce, well, based on the amount of files that I see here and the hashes and all the stuff that I'm seeing, you have this type of set. Whether it's a non-merged, merge, or split. So we could introduce something like you're saying, Chunky. Tell us what set that you have. Okay, so you tell us what set you have. Now we need, and this is the, assuming that 1, every user knows what set they have. 2, that they haven't just like grabbed random files. And actually all of their files might be part of different sets. Maybe they've got a game that's non-merged, and maybe they have another game that's merged, and maybe they have another game that's split, all in the same folder. That's a possibility. So if we force a user, tell us which one you have, that might be a stopping point for a lot of users. At that point, they might be like, okay, this is too complicated. I don't know what they're asking me. I just have MAME files. What the heck is going on? Right. We would need something like a ROM manager to do this. And so we've recently talked about what it would be required to do this. And then we would have to, like, after we figured all that stuff out. So let's say we forget about all those people that know nothing about MAME, and we're just talking to people that know MAME. You know which set that you've downloaded, and you've downloaded a merge set or whatever, and you tell us, I've downloaded a merge set. So now we need to actually scan like a file that MAME generates. Now remember, MAME is not on Android. There is no such thing as an official version of MAME on Android, and there's no command on Android that will allow us to generate a MAME list file to run our comparison and stuff on. And so we would literally have to either have access to this file or build it ourselves. And know about this information about every single MAME game somewhere that we control, and keep that updated after every single month. And so now we're talking, make it so that we have a database somewhere that we build, that we maintain, that we update, that we control in a format that can work on both Android, Windows, whatever that we want. Like, we control it. Let's build that infrastructure. Let's put in the automation so that we know that this is always the most up to date. We know that we'll need copies of all of that stuff for every single different version of MAME. Or build out a database that can house every single different variation of MAME and get all that information. So we'd be asking the user, which version of MAME do you have, and which set that you have, and then grab the appropriate file from our server, the details, so that you can have it. So now we're at a starting point where we have the necessary information to run a scan. So now we're scanning through this file and these files, and we are essentially grabbing all of every single file that you would possibly need for this game. And we would be recording that list somewhere. So your data file for your arcade, maybe we can put it in there. And that, which is already probably quite extensive, would get larger by a lot. And we would fill in all that information and maybe expose it to the user. I don't know. Maybe not. Users don't really care. And they can make mistakes with that information. So we've systematically gathered this information. We built the infrastructure. We did all that stuff. We put all of the stuff inside of your data folders. We know now which files a game potentially needs to run. And now we can lock that into our NAS thing and say, hey, check all of these files when they launch this game. And we go and we check those locations. Now here's another problem that I actually just thought of. If your game was a CHD file, you would have to answer a third question on top of version and set. You would have to answer, where are your CHD files? Are they inside of your ROM folder? Are they somewhere else? If they're somewhere else, what is that file path? And we would have to record that file path. And so now we're in a situation where we've asked users 3 questions that we hope that they know the answer to get to a point. We built an infrastructure out and a database, maybe multiple databases, of all of this MAME information. And now we can balloon out someone's data file for Arcade for the sole purpose of being able to use it with the NAS feature. And so we finally get to a point where we probably broke this thing. Not really broke it. We might have stopped. We've definitely raised the bar of entry at this point, right? If you want to play a MAME, you must know where you got this set. You must know the so that you would know the ROM version, the ROM's type, set type, and you must understand what CHDs are and where they are in your library. I assume for the most part, people would know that. Not everyone. It would bring people out of the woodwork to basically say, I don't know these questions. I cannot move further. If we put those questions, let's say, in an import, people would not be able to import. Or they would choose incorrectly. They would just like randomly choose something and then just to get by that screen. And then we would be using incorrect information from then point on. And so if we could figure out a way to automate that and not like pare that down to ask as little questions to the user to be able to actually know, that would be best. It's tough to do that. It would take a long time. So the scanning part would take a substantial amount of time. Yeah, if you're retro wizzy. You just solve this all for us. So and after all of that, the benefit would be that you have a set, or that you can launch a MAME game that's on your NAS. I do like that idea. Can I send all those people to you when they go, I've got a merge set, I'm not going to use this non-merge set? We'll instantly get a feature request that says, please support merged sets for your LaunchBox for Android NAS implementation. Though it wouldn't be any worse right now if you had a merge set. More than likely wouldn't work very well on Android. See, there you go. See, Nogarth wouldn't be able to even do this. He doesn't remember what set he has, what version you have, what type of set that you have. That's the problem, I think, with these sets. If they just tagged somewhere that indicated to anyone what kind of set you have, that would be nice. every file knew what kind of set it was, just with like a bit. You only need 3 states. Oh yeah, I'm sure they love that. I mean, we just had, where are you, Snarfu, basically say, "Oh, I'm going through my annual MAME update." Like, but now we're gonna implement a feature that basically like, okay, well, we're now forcing you. Like, you're gonna need to update your set right now. Although we don't know, we would have to understand that ahead of time. That would be kind of anyway, that's a thought experiment of what exactly we would have to do to get to a point where we could grab. And now what I'm going to say next is we want to do that work. We want to get to a place where we can do this. Because it will not only help this one network attached storage concept, but will also help other features that we want to include in the future. It will help immensely throughout allowing us to support other sets, even if we wanted to on Android. Or just getting better matching on Android. Right now, it's not perfect. Although, for some users, it would be. And for others, it would not be, depending on which set that you're throwing at it. We could try to restrict it down, which might be what we would have to do, but normally we don't like doing that. Yeah, and Snarfu, do you even need to update? Are there any games or improvements to MAME that's jumping out at you, that's making you update? Sometimes we just do things because they're there to do. You know, you're just like, MAME's fine. I have all the games that I would ever want, but I'm on version 239 or 238. And look, oh my god, they're on 276. That's a lot of numbers that are different. I better update. And you update and use the new set in the exact same way you were using the old set. So, just something to do. Turns into no benefits at all. However, there are some games that have been introduced into MAME that might interest people, and that makes it so updating is actually highly coveted for those people. Really, they but you would have to check. I think they do list all those games. Yeah, discovering new games is always fun, which is one reason why we have that whole game discovery center concept. Anyway, I do have to head out. It's been a great chat like always with you guys, and I do have much more stuff that I had on my list like always that we can always talk about in the future. I do eventually want to get to this whole big box hybrid view, and I also just want to talk about big box in general and features that people would want to see on big box. elaborate on the attract mode thing, on if people use attract mode, if they don't use attract mode, what could we get, what could we do to make people use attract mode, or what are the problems with attract mode that make it so maybe we need an alternative there that could definitely help. Like, what are the reasons why people are using attract mode to begin with? I would love to understand as well. I want to get into our games database. We talked about it a little bit last week, but I want to get to very specifics on if we were to expand the database, what is the first thing you feel is sorely needed in our database? That'll have to be next week. And I wouldn't mind, I did write down the new question, what would make bezels more useful for people? What would make you use it for everyone that doesn't use one right now? What if bezels were some different kind of concept? They actually gave you useful information, or they did something that caused you to say, yeah, that actually is a good idea, and I would actually use that. And of course, Snarfo. Game specific controls. I wish I could get into more specifics about that, because I would love to hear what you mean by that. But next week, another week, we'll have to do it next week. What I will be doing after the stream is trying to prepare potentially the next Windows beta. So I'll be putting that out if I have enough time to do so. And that should solidify the beta, would be basically become the release candidate. And people can respond to it. I'll make a post over on the beta thread, over on our forums, and then we'll keep going that way. And if everything goes well and we can fix up any remaining issues from now until there, till next week, we might have a release week next week. So I really hope that's the case. Could push it another week. Who knows what's going to happen? We definitely don't know, but we think we're in a good spot. But thanks so much for coming, guys. Great talking to you like always. We will talk to you guys again next Thursday. Yeah, next Thursday. We definitely will be back. All right. Have a good weekend. If you enjoy your long weekend, see you guys soon. Take care, everybody.